Welcome back, everyone. Our guest today is Professor Glenda Gray, a pediatrician who has dedicated her life to the care of children and HIV medicine. Prof. Gray is the president and CEO of the South African Medical Research Council, but her journey began as a doctor committed to protecting children from HIV at a time when pediatric AIDS was devastating families across South Africa. Her groundbreaking work in preventing mother-to-child HIV transmission and pediatric HIV research has saved countless young lives, not just in South Africa, but around the world. For her contributions to science and medicine, she was awarded the Order of Mapungubwe in gold, which is the highest honor South Africa can bestow on a citizen. She's also been recognized globally, elected to the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, and named on one of Time magazine's top 100 most influential people in the world. So today we're exploring her journey from pediatrician to one of the world's leading medical researchers and scientific voices. Prof. Gray, welcome. Thank you.
Well, I was the president
and
CEO of the MRC.
So that's the one thing my AI got wrong.
And I got Mapungubwe in silver.
In silver, okay, you see.
Okay. So yeah.
Well, that's a lesson to people. Don't do better research. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
exactly. But Prof, that's the last thing I'm going to read. It's the first time I've ever read out an intro. I didn't want to get it wrong.
You did because
and ironically, I got some of it wrong.
Yeah.
I was telling you off camera, this show is not about the black and white about doctor. It's about why did I become? It's your journey. You don't need to prepare. And hopefully today we won't just be doing black and white. We'll be getting 50 shades of gray. So yeah. Prof, I mean, how did you, when you grew up, when you were growing up, did you ever think one day I'm going to be, Time's top 100 influential people? I'm going to be a doctor. What did you want to be?
I always wanted to be a doctor. So from a little girl, and there was no real specific reason because no one in my family were doctors. But I just kind of had this innate feeling that I was going to be a doctor.
What did your parents do?
And my father was an engineer, and my mother was a bookkeeper, and my sisters became teachers because in those days that they paid. If you became a teacher, if you wanted to go to university and there was no money, you'd get a bursary, become a teacher, and then go do something else after that or after teaching for a while. So when I said I wanted to become a doctor, it is sometimes a joke at school because at my school, no one became doctors. If you were clever, you became a teacher because we came from a poor community. And so I think everyone, kind of indulged me. And I applied for medicine only at Wits University, and it was the year that they were doing an experiment. So they wanted to diversify the people that they were bringing in. Normally they bring in private school straight A students, and to get in you had to go and have an interview with a group of people, write an essay, and answer specific questions. So I went there, and I guess they were looking for diversity. It was the first time there were a lot of women, a lot of people of color at the here, and people coming from quite diverse backgrounds. And so the experiment worked out well for me because I became a doctor. In the beginning, it was difficult because I was at Boksburg High. We never had maths and science teachers, and so the first 2 years I struggled, and then suddenly everything clicked, and I started to really enjoy and thrive at medical school.
Yeah, it's quite interesting for us hearing a white person say, they were looking for diversity, and that was, the premise of how you got in. And I'm sure, you don't mean a gray sort of persona when you meant looking for people of color. Can you take us back then as to what era was it, what sort of year was it, and the diversity that they were looking for that sort of included you was, I'm assuming it was from a socioeconomic status. And prior to that, it was probably, as you said, like, private school with people with straight A's.
Yeah.
So when was that? And even before that, take us back.
Sure.
So you grew up in Boksburg.
Yes.
Okay.
So
down the road.
I grew up on the wrong side of the railway line in Boksburg. So Boksburg North area. So we were kind of working class, poor families, poor big families, and not rich. And so I grew up on the other side of the railway track, and a lot of the people that I went to school with grew up in Parkdean, Libradine, all those places. So coming from a poor white background, no one really is successful. So when I used to catch the bus to school, and at the end of the year, when they would tell who was going to get prizes, my bus was always proud of me, because I was their kind of I demonstrated that even though you were poor, you could thrive, and I was beating the rich kids, which was it was important for aspiration. So in 1981, so I went to medical school in 1981. So when I say diverse, up until then, Wits Medical School had been largely white, and very few black or any other. Any other grouping, black, maybe I should say black as in black, meaning black African, Indian, coloured. So, had very few people of colour in that spectrum. And I guess, very little government, and also very few, it was never 50% women.
Yeah.
So this was an attempt to bring more women in, bring people from different cultural backgrounds, and people diverse color. And so I guess I got in on the diversity ticket, so to speak. So which was so we were an eclectic group of medical students. We were odd, and everyone knew that we were this odd group. In the experiment class.
Yes.
So it was quite an interesting, experience to be this group that was so different to everything else they'd seen before.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, essentially, you also benefited from a diversity and inclusion kind of program.
Yeah, I benefited from social engineering.
Yes.
So that's
cool.
why I also believe in social engineering, because there are benefits of transformation, and looking at who should be what with a different lens.
Yeah. Okay, but not being exposed to doctors in the family and things like that. I mean, what made you think medicine? Was somebody an inspiration, or did you watch something or read something?
So I liked animals.
Okay.
So one day I was watching a vet. There was a breech car delivery, and he had to take a rope and
in real life
and pull a calf out of the the reproductive tract of the. Anyway, so I was swinging on a gate watching him, and then he looked up and said, "So Glenda, are you going to become a vet one day?"
Yeah.
And I looked at him and I said, "No, I'm going to become a doctor. I want to save real people." So anyway, so
poor horse.
So anyway, so then and that kind of stuck. And
so the animals around where you were growing up.
So at one stage of my life when I was little, we lived just outside Heidelberg near Mapleton, in a small holding. It was my father's dream to be a farmer, and he failed miserably at that. My mother was the person who had to ride the tractor. He was working as an engineer, and she would try and run the farm. So she was a laborer. So I learned hard work from my mother, because she would plow, she rode the tractor. We used to go and sell tomatoes at the train stations. You can imagine these poor white kids running around. We used to go knock on doors, sell milk, get chased away. Anyway, so it was I had an experience. I had a very good grounding experience about poverty, being poor, diversity, because already at that stage we were selling
produce.
To produce at train stations, and where the so-called non-Europeans, so in those days there were the non-European part of the railway line and European, and so very, very quickly we were exposed to poverty and diversity, and so we got to see as a white person, I got to see a different lens of South Africa, just based on our circumstances.
That's amazing. So were you a bookworm in school? Were you?
I was.
Yeah.
I used to I used to catch then we eventually moved. The farm, we eventually had to sell it and blah blah blah. So we landed up in Boksburg, and I used to catch the bus to the library during school holidays and get piles of books and read a book a day. So we would wake up, we wouldn't get out of bed in our pajamas, and we would just read, eat post toasties, and read books. So basically, we would devour books. So I read a lot of books.
But was that the norm in the time, or were other kids out playing in the streets?
Well, we used to play cricket in the back garden, but I loved reading. So it was mostly I used to go and catch the bus by yourself, because in those days you run wild.
As
no one looks after you. Parents go to work, and latchdoor kids. So you basically you bring yourself up. So you would just go and get the books and catch and then come back and read.
That's cool, eh? I mean, it has its benefits, the so-called latchdoor kid life.
Yeah.
You do your own thing, you learn some independence, you figure stuff out. Okay, so you're doing well in school then, clearly.
So I was doing well at school.
Beating all the rich kids and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, all the rich kids, I would say.
But was that the same school, to the rich kids and the poor kids?
Yeah, so it was a government school, Boksburg High, and basically it was near Park Dean. I don't know if you know the East Rand. It was just near Park Dean, and so we would catch the bus from Boksburg North to the school. When I was younger, we lived in Brakpan, and so after the farm, we moved to a place near Scarpensrus, Witpoortjie, and we used to catch the train to Boksburg to go to school. So we would get on the 6:30 train, get off at the station at 7, and then walk to school, and that was at Martin School. So we're from Boksburg East Station to Martin School, which is probably about 3 or 4 kilometers every day.
Yeah.
We would save our bus fare so we could buy ice creams in the afternoon. So very from a very young age, we were these kind of independent, managing, navigating a life by ourselves.
Yeah. But academically, what do you think was going on? Did you have any aspirations at that stage, knowing that you were good at school and good at academics, that you would want to end up in academia?
Yeah, so I didn't think I was going to end up in academia. So my idea was to run a ward at Baragwanath Hospital and look after kids and teach.
It's pretty specific.
Yeah. I wanted. So it's just that was my aspiration. I wanted to basically have a ward where at Baragwanath Hospital there are all these pediatric wards, and I wanted to be one of the consultants who ran a ward, and then basically look after the kids, do ward rounds, teach students, so that was going to be those are my aspirations, just to basically run a ward at Baragwanath Hospital.
Is this, you figured this out when you were a student?
No, not then. So so as I was doing clinical practice, you start to see what you liked, and I dug the kids. But so in terms of school, maybe what's important about teachers. So around about grade, what we would call grade standard 8, what's grade
10?
Grade 10. We were doing physics, and I wrote a physics test, and I think I got 70% for it. And for me, I thought that was quite good. And the teacher at the time threw the test results, the test on my desk, and he said, "Not good enough." Not good enough. And then I thought, so he made me kind of double think, because maybe as girl children, 70, we settled for 70 for physics. And he just said, that's not good enough. And that made me think, he saw something in me that, and so the next test, I got 80, and then the next test I get 90, and then the next test 98. So he made me he made me start to enjoy physics and then chemistry. So that was what was lucky, because basically I did well in chemistry and physics, and it was because he believed in me.
Wow.
So it's just the power of teachers. And so if I hadn't done well in physics and chemistry, probably I wouldn't have got good marks, good enough marks to get to medical school.
What's your opinion on that? Because, I mean, that's a significant enough story for you to remember and tell us. And it's a common theme or thread here in this podcast. I mean, Yash has mentioned it before when he was unshaven at university and he got kicked out, and I don't know what happened, but a few of our other guests have mentioned it. And people always say that it's not the quality of the person in academia, how good they are academics, but how good are they in order to be able to reproduce that in a learnable way for you to actually...
It's how they inspire a learner.
Yeah, you have to see the light, so, and I see this a lot because I in my work as a researcher, as a scientist, or as in clinical research, you see, sometimes you see a light in someone, and you see magic, and the most important thing that when I see this magic or this light in someone, I do my best to open up opportunities, because I know they're going to thrive.
Yes.
And they're going to fly. And I guess what this teacher did is he saw some light in me.
Yes.
And a lot of people ignore that light and like kind of think you just got to, each man for himself. And so teachers, people who are involved in running teams or nurturing, it's important when you see light to give them opportunity.
But isn't it also like amazing, Prof? It's one moment in grade 10, standard 8, where a teacher looked at you, threw a paper down and said, not good enough, that you remember to this day, like decades later, right? And if that guy didn't do that, who knows where you would have gone and where you would have been, right?
But also in the way that he did it, because as you know, some people see light in people and they want to cultivate it. They want to say, I see something in you and I want to inspire you and I want to do better. He did it in a roundabout way where he showed you, no, you were good, but you were not good enough.
Yeah.
And that's what he said. He almost used,
reverse
psychology in order to motivate you.
And also because girl students would settle at 70.
Is that how it was those days? Tell us about that kind of dynamic.
Because what happens, as you know, in high school, is that girls in the first 2-3 years in high school are doing better than the boys, and then they kind of plateau and maybe they settle.
Okay. I don't know, because I went to an all-boys school.
This is a co-ed school.
Yeah,
yours
it's a co-ed school. And then so what you normally see in standard 8 is that the boys start to take off. So the guys that you were thrashing, start to basically take you on. And I guess a lot of girl children may settle. I think 70 is not too shabby.
Yeah, those days.
And 70 in those days, 70 was not shabby.
Right.
And then just him saying, because then he saw something in me that I wasn't seeing.
What was his name, Prof?
He was Mr. Marks. His name was Mr. Marks.
Yeah.
I don't even know what happened to him.
Yeah.
But he was this, he was there for 2 years, and then, he went on somewhere else.
And he might never know that he'd inspired
this. But you never know these things. So I was often when I'm going around, some young person will come up to me and say, "You don't remember me, but I worked at you and I worked at PHRU, and if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be this.
How cool!
And if it wasn't for you in that, so sometimes you don't even know who you touch. Sometimes you touch people very directly, where you open up spaces and you move them along, and others, you may not even realize. But it's always such a treat when they come up to you and say, "It's because of you I started a business."
What a cool feeling, eh?
It's a lovely feeling, and it's a nice feeling to, and that's what nice, I guess, about academia, is because you always are working in a team, and you always are working with a whole strata of people who are anything from doctors to people who are, who make the tea.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and people who make the tea become counselors and become study coordinators.
Wow.
And, so that, I guess it's like success.
Yeah.
You see something in them and you
we've literally got
new.
success behind the camera here. Yeah.
So, success is that you saw something that made you believe that, you could do more.
So, Prof, tell us about getting into med school. So you only applied to
Wits. Well, we were poor, so I couldn't afford if we had to go somewhere else. And it means I had to get on an aeroplane, find a student. I caught the train, so I stayed, for the first year at the JCE Res. And then second year I commuted from Boksburg. So,
but how was the interview and stuff to get in? Did they ask you grueling questions?
They did ask. They asked your view on. So they asked what books you were reading. So I guess to gauge, are you reading in a big
panel? Was it a big panel?
Ayn Rand, James Joyce, or Edith Blyton? It was. There was. I remember there was a sociologist on it called Beryl Unterhalter. Okay. So there was a bunch of,
I wonder if she's related to a lawyer.
Yeah. I think they are family.
Okay. Yeah.
And they asked you what books you were reading. Then you had to write an essay.
Wow.
And then they asked you, like, so what do you believe? Do you believe in abortion? Capital punishment. What's your view on capital punishment?
Wow.
So they wanted to know. They were looking for, I guess, people that had a perspective of the world. And read newspaper. So they were looking for kids, 18-year-olds who were reading the newspaper.
It's fascinating.
Who thought about capital punishment and abortion. And things like that. So and also, were you just besides school, excelling at school, are you a well-rounded person? And so some people, are just do well at school, but they don't know about the news and about the politics of the day. 76. Because we were at school in 1976 with the student uprisings in Soweto. And so we got to hear about all of this stuff. And I guess I also was lucky because at that stage, I had a brother who was at Wits University, and he was part of NUSAS.
What's that?
And he, which is the student, as is like the SRC of today.
Okay.
And he was a political activist, and he would also bring me home feminist books. He gave me in standard 8 feminist literature to read about feminism and that. So I was I was lucky to have him he politicized me, and then also being able to read these books that maybe not many 16-year-olds were reading at that stage from Boksburg nogal.
Yeah, exactly.
So what Boksburg girl is reading
So did you impress the panel? Did you know that you impressed them? Or?
I don't know. I must have, because they gave me a place.
Yeah, but they didn't give you an indication in there.
I got it accepted before my marks came out.
Okay.
Yeah,
but when you came out of that interview, was it like, oh goodness?
I didn't have a perspective. So you don't have a perspective on these things.
It's funny because I interviewed an orthodontist called Mark Wertheimer. He's a big orthodontist in Sandton, and he said he went for one of these interviews also. And the first question the guy asked him was, have you ever opened a watch and put it back together? And do you know what a springkaan is? And how many teeth does a springkaan have? So it wasn't like that kind of interview where it was just weird. Yeah. Abstract. Yeah. It wasn't like that.
Yeah. Well, if he'd asked my son, my son used to take everything apart and then put it together again. You'd come home and there was just a screw, and you think, this is never ever going to come together again.
But if you
put it together.
I would do that, but it would never go back together.
Me too. Boys like to dismantle things, but not usually put it back together.
And he'd come home, even now he has a motorbike, and I'll come home, and in the garage, the motorbike is just in pieces, and I think, okay, I'm never going to be able to put my car in the garage again. And
but as a mom,
yeah.
that's probably a better way for it to be rather than riding around.
Better than
But-
riding.
And then then suddenly he's the bike's together and he's riding it.
And then there's a nut lying in the garage floor.
So how was med school?
Yeah, tell us about med school, and especially from your perspective of being the only, well, not only, but quite a new age student now as opposed to what it was. It must have been very alienating.
So it was.
rich
So
kids,
yeah. So first of all,
ladies.
so first of all, that's when you understand socioeconomic differences in class. So so you go into med school, and there's people riding Alfa Romeos and have their own cars. You don't have a car. Even the clothes that you wear are, you know that your clothes are bought at OK Bazaar, and they buying their clothes. Even then you can see the clothing difference. So you're very acutely aware. So that's also why I understand how students from poor backgrounds must feel, particularly in this kind of in medical school where there are lots of rich people. And you might be hungry.
All different stresses that nobody thinks about.
And the clothes you wear are not designer clothes, and so you immediately know that you're odd, and you're different, and you're not privileged. So suddenly, because in Boksburg, even the rich kids weren't that rich. Suddenly you're in an environment where people are really rich, and you feel your poorness, quite substantially. And then also, because you haven't been to a private school, you're completely disadvantaged. And so I understand bridging, because the first 2 years, I was just, kind of whiplashed, barely passing. And then suddenly, you catch up, and then you thrive and you do better. So when you look back, I probably am the most successful student from my class. That no one became an A-rated scientist, and this and and so if you predicted someone's success in first year, you can be so completely wrong. And so I was probably a dull student in first and second year, and then suddenly the lights went on.
How did they go on?
Things just started to, you start to catch up. Things start to make sense. You start to figure out how to learn.
Did you make friends?
So I did make friends. So I had, we had lots of, I had, friends, and then, also, so lots of things are happening. So as you go into medical school, so you eventually catch up, you make friends. You also become politicized because you're at university, and so and this is the 80s, and you got to take a stand. And so, you also become, I also became politicized as well. And then, being acutely aware of what, the 80s was a terrible time in South Africa, the most violent time, and so, and so being at Wits University, you quickly get exposed to activism. So that also was good for me as a doctor, is to, you can't come into medicine in a bubble. In fact, I always feel that doctors are most, maybe doctors and dentists and nurses, if you come from a white background, they're the only people that ever get to engage closely and intimately with people of all races, and staff of all races. So very quickly, doctors are immersed in a diverse situation, and that exposure is critical because it kind of shapes your empathy, your view of the world, your political stance.
You can see that disparity firsthand.
And so that's why. So I think that's it was a gift to be able to be a doctor, because basically it showed me. You would go to Baragwanath Hospital, and then you would go to the Joburg Gen, and your black students in your class can't go there, but you can go there. So then eventually,
They're not allowed to go there.
Because in those days, these were, in
We're
particular
ignorant.
gynecology.
Prof, we are
imagine like gynecology.
Yeah.
And they, so like the last vestigial of like whiteness is a woman's body and her vagina.
Yeah.
So, so there's only, so black students couldn't rotate through particularly gynecology and obstetrics in those days. And so suddenly you get split. And then so some of us then refused. Some white students then said, if black students can't go to gynecology and obstetrics at the Joburg Gen, then I'm not going. And so there were students, white students also took a stance that not to also go to those wards. And then they had to obviously you had to go to the head of department and explain why you didn't want to go to the Joburg Gen, and then you get sent to Natalspruit and other places. So so very, very quickly you get aware of the kind of prejudice and kind of petty racism, petty apartheid. That's happening.
So petty, eh?
That is so petty. But it was a whole process. So when the hospitals opened up, there had to be a whole kind of engagement about who you bring in first, and you also that there had to be you had to assert. So the moment black gynecologist arrived at the Gen at that stage, there had to be a team with him and said it's not negotiable. He will touch you.
Sure.
If you don't like it, then go to another hospital. And so you had to have that kind of stance. And when we desegregated wards, at that stage I was working as a pediatric registrar, we would bring black families and patients, kids to the ward. And if the white families objected, we'd say, leave the hospital. We're not separating you in these wards. We're not having a black ward and a white ward. You all have to be in the same
Was that
ward.
Going against the grain, or what was legislated at the time?
So we had to. So this was when we. So because of my involvement in student activism, I then got involved in something called the Health Workers Association, which was there were different associations, liberalist. There were different progressive associations in those days. There was NAMDA that organized doctors and nurses, and there was Health Workers Association that organized people irrespective of whether you're a porter, radiologist, or a doctor. So I joined that group. I didn't want to hang out with a bunch of dentists and doctors. They wouldn't even let nurses come in,
Elitists,
and
progressive.
so there were only two whites who joined HWA, and most other progressive whites who joined NAMDA. So
did your other white colleagues not like look at these people? What are they doing? Did you get any flack from them or not?
I think that so
nobody talks about that.
People were uncomfortable, So when I was there was a period of time when we were organizing strikes in hospitals, and the head of Nihawu, there was a court order. He wasn't allowed to come in within 100 meters of Baragwanath Hospital, and so we put a white coat and a stethoscope on him. So he walked into the hospital.
Wow.
And then we jumped over the turnstiles and we took the lift to where the superintendent was staying, and then we took over the office. And then they came and arrested us. But so
I was about to say, you could have been arrested for that.
We were, and then it was strange because one of the heads of department at Barrow was an all Afrikaans doctor, pediatrician, and she phoned the police. So obviously these guys have got connections. So she phoned the police station and said, you must release these people. And I was on call that night. Maybe they were more worried that I wasn't.
They had to work overtime.
Yeah, so and she has to be on call tonight. So anyway, they released it. So they were a little bit uncomfortable. They were a little bit uncomfortable, but they also were, they weren't gonna criticize me, but they they were wary. Shall we say the old guard were wary of people like us.
So how was jail?
No, were your family and friends proud of you, or they?
So my my family they kind of just let me. They didn't ever criticize or not support me. They just stayed out. So besides my brother, the rest of the family were kind of, I would call liberal, but they were never ever going to stick their necks out, in any way. But but they were never ever judgmental or criticize me. So they accepted that I was quirky.
Well, that's good enough support at the time for that time.
And that was good enough. And they've always been like
stance.
that. Yeah. And so they and maybe because as I said, because being a doctor, you're in this fortunate role in society where you can actually make a difference.
Yes.
So if you're a banker, you're not exactly, I don't know, you're not put into a situation where you can act and say this is not fair and this is not happening. So you get
lawyers and doctors can change the world. I feel they've got power.
So you have the privilege of so as lawyers you can defend someone who's up for treason. There was a
but not dentists so much, Prof.
Well, you could, you could run a free clinic.
It depends.
I heard a lovely But I heard a lovely story on 702. There was a quiz, and this little boy had to answer 5 questions, and they were difficult, and he was a bright boy, and if he answered all 5 questions, he would win 10,000 rand. And they said to him on the radio, if you won 10,000 rand, what would you do with it? He said, I'd give it to my mother so I could go to the orthodontist. So anyway, he got a bit unraveled. Then he got all 4 questions right. And then the 5th question, he got unraveled. I guess the pressure. And he didn't make the last question, so he only got 1,000. But what was beautiful about that, an orthodontist, a dentist phoned in and said, send me the details of this child. I will do their teeth for free. So you see, so dentists can do things.
That is a very small world, because I think the person you're talking about is me.
Was it you? Okay.
I'm not an orthodontist, but we did sponsor
it was a
the
dentist
case.
who said, So you see, even dentists can make a difference.
Wow.
They can change a life.
Yeah.
But I feel like doctors and lawyers can change the world.
Well, in the doctors, so depending on what you do.
and politicians.
Yeah.
But anyway,
depending on what, so doctors at an individual level can save individual lives. But then I guess the beauty of being a doctor is that you can go from being a practitioner, clinician, or you could go and do other things. And that's where I was lucky. So I was this pediatrician. I worked as a pediatrician before AIDS even happened. So I belonged to the world where we didn't have HIV. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And then as a young doctor, HIV starts to explode in your ward, and pretty soon every 3rd child is dying. So my dream of running a well baby clinic and looking at a little ward was changed, because suddenly as a pediatrician, I needed to do something. You couldn't just have these kids dying like flies, in your ward. And so I didn't even ever see myself as a scientist, because scientists were for clever people.
Yeah.
I thought you only become a scientist if you're clever. I only realized afterwards you become a scientist because you're curious, and you become a scientist because you don't know the answer. And actually, science isn't about clever people. It's about people trying to unravel an answer for a question. So there I was, and I wanted to stop transmission from mother to child, and the only way we could do it was to look at, because we had no drugs then. This is early. This is 96. I've jumped up and down with my timeline.
It's fine, no problem.
But and so suddenly you write I write a protocol, and I designed a study, and suddenly you're enrolling women into a study, you're following them up, you're looking at the impact of breastfeeding on transmission, you're running a cohort of women and children, you're getting results, and suddenly these results are strong, and they change policy. So quickly I realized, research provides evidence, and evidence can be used to advance policy or as activism. So at that stage, there was AIDS denialism in the country. The government was refusing to provide antiretroviral therapy to women, to prevent their babies getting HIV. And the Treatment Action Campaign took the government to court, and we as clinician scientists could provide the evidence that made them win.
Did you have to go to court?
Case. So we went to court, and we were providing the medical advice to the advocates for their argument, and then you realize just how powerful evidence is, how powerful science is, and then and then by doing this research, you basically provide an avenue for people to get treated in South Africa. So we used to be running these clinics for women living with HIV and their children, and we used to bring in people to talk to them, and they would, we would have, at that stage there were two epidemics, one amongst mostly Black women, heterosexual, and then an epidemic in men who have sex with men. And we would bring men who have sex with men into the clinic, and they would talk. And these guys were on treatment trials in the suburbs. And these women said to us, if you're white and you live in the suburbs, you can get on a treatment trial, and how come we can't? And it was a good question. So we then started trying to get drug companies to include government sites. And at first, that's these people, you need nutrition, you need watches, and eventually someone cut us some slack and gave us a trial. Pharmacy Upjohn at that stage gave us a trial where we could enroll women into the trial. And at first, it was a struggle even to get the trial approved by our ethics committee, because they said, there's only 2 years post-trial access and it's unethical. And then when we told the women this is what the ethics said, they said, who are these people? We want to go and talk to them. So I put them in my car, the woman and the children, and we went to the ethics committee. And there's a bunch of white men sitting there, and there's women with babies crawling around, and they try and explain to these women why they're not going to approve the study. And these women are saying, if I have 2 more years, so I don't care that I only have 2 years post-trial access. My baby is 2, and if I get 2 more years, that's, I get to see her 4, or maybe even more. And like you're saying that it's unethical, and so basically these women changed the view of an ethics committee. And so that's also what so I learned very quickly that, working with the community, working with activists, and then also generating evidence helps. And if we hadn't done these trials in the 90s, we wouldn't have had doctors who were experienced enough to initiate people on treatment. And so the first places when we were able to get ARVs in South Africa came to the researchers that had been doing all these trials, because we knew how to initiate treatment. And we were at that stage. We put about 1,000 people on treatment in about 6 months. We were putting 100 people a day on treatment. And and that was okay. So that there's been some important times in my life that have been really pivotal. That one was basically initiating treatment. And our clinic went from a place where there were drips and wheelchairs and oxygen, to a clinic where no one was sick, and it was amazing.
And Prof, sorry, was the objective then to prevent just mother to child transmission, or the overall treatment of AIDS?
So we had 2 objectives. One was to prevent mother to child transmission, and there were different trials for that. But the other trials was post pregnancy. These women needed to be on treatment. Okay. And so that's how we were able to get those.
So it was
trials.
From a pediatric approach then.
Yeah, it was, because we listened to, you're in a clinic with women, you're running support groups, and you're listening. So the good thing about being a doctor or being involved in these kind of areas is that you get to hear, that's what's good about being a doctor or you get to be in the face of the problem, of humanity, their suffering, whether their sickness. And sometimes you don't even want to know. So you just want to treat some, at times as a doctor. Like, I don't even want to know if you've got a mental health problem. I'm going to prescribe you your antibiotics and, and then, but it's also important. But if you don't ask those questions, like, are you sleeping at night? And sometimes you think, I don't want to open that door. I don't want to know that, you're out of work and you're on the bones of your ass, and but that's also important because as a doctor you get you get face to face with humanity, and it can be ugly and painful.
Prof, you said something huge just now, and you probably don't even realize it because you've lived through it. But you said you come from a time when there was no HIV to a time when HIV was huge. What was it like, that transition? I'll tell you why I thought about this is because one of our guests we interviewed, Norman Kai, he told us how he used to see patients with no gloves as a dentist.
Yeah.
And to us, that seems mind-blowing, right? But then everything changed. So what was it like? Was it scary? Was it like, oh gosh, are we going to get infected here? Take us through that.
Yeah.
That
so it was so while I was a medical student, we started to hear about the slim disease in Uganda and about the epidemic in the US. And so we started to hear about HIV. And at that stage, the government, which was the apartheid government, had very strict, obviously, border controls, and they were testing mine workers, and they would repatriate all mine workers, Malawians, or people from Lesotho who had HIV. So we just basically had a very vociferous stance against HIV. So as a medical student, we got lectures on this new
slim disease,
because people were so thin.
Oh.
So we got lectures. So we were getting lectures. There's this new disease. It's in West Central Africa. We didn't even know what it was, that they had this virus had jumped the species barrier, and no one really knew how it emerged and everything. So
almost like COVID.
Yeah, so it's like COVID. And then, so so it's theoretical. You're writing notes, everything in your...
But not like COVID, because much slower, right?
Much slower.
Yeah.
So then when there were, so if there was so on the odd occasion, there would be a child who would land up, and eventually you test and the kid comes back diagnosed with HIV. And then it would be a grand ward round, because this was an exotic disease of childhood, so everyone would come around, and then the physician, there's the stigma, explain to you the stigmata of this one's got PCP pneumonia, and look at the x-rays, so it was like, it was an exotic disease at that stage. And then suddenly, and it felt literally overnight, but in a space of 2 or 3 years, suddenly we went from, 1 woman in 100 being HIV, who was pregnant, being diagnosed with HIV, to 1 woman in 10. That's how it changed. And it was, literally as we were doing our clinical years,
as a student,
the epidemic was changing, and you were starting to see HIV. And then fast forward, you land up at Barra, and 30% of all pregnant women have got HIV, and in the wards, 1 in 3 kids are infected. And, basically, and these kids are, there's no treatment. The only thing you can give them is Bactrim for PCP pneumonia. And, you just basically are choreographing death at that stage. And that's devastating, because the women were young, first baby, they'd come with their Road to Health card, with, Christmas, how you wrap your when you go to school, you have to go and wrap your textbook and your books, and you put Christmas cards, and this is what, these women come with their Christmas cards and the name of their child in Koki pen, and excited about this
Oh,
journey, but then only to know that, first of all, so the child was the canary in the coal mine, only to realize my baby's going to be dead within a year and I'm going to die as well.
Sheesh.
And they were 20, 22, 23.
And in those early days of the so-called slims and stuff, was it seen as, just a disease of men who have sex with men and something in Africa? Or what was it like?
So it was seen as two. There were the two epidemics. And the one was amongst blood transfusion hemophiliacs and men who have sex with men. And at that stage, no one knew that it could be transmitted through breast milk or through so we didn't even know that was a route of transmission until we started to see babies. And that was in the US that were actually, were infected either, through their husbands had hemophilia. The mother was infected, and the child then was infected, like Elizabeth Glaser, and those kind of cases, and so there was, and then we saw this epidemic coming down from central Congo. So I guess much like COVID, so we have these origins that are happening all over, and it's not just one epidemic or two. It's through sexual acquisition, no matter what sex you have, and through blood and through breast milk. So that's as long as there's bodily fluids and there's there will be virus and you'll be can be transmitted.
Okay, so as you said, we did skip a lot in the chronology there because we went straight to the research and stuff. I mean, we didn't even talk about what made you think of doing peds. Was there a moment there? Or was it just a natural progression from med school?
So when you go from discipline to discipline, I always like the kids. First of all, because they were easy to manage. They're not big adults.
Yeah.
It's hard to turn an adult around.
That's the opposite for
Yeah,
dentists.
exactly. I was about to say that.
Yeah,
Because try injecting in the mouth.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah. You can strap them in a blanket so they can't move.
Yeah, peds were
when you want to take flat.
I used to be really afraid of kids. Yeah.
So when they were sick, they were sick. But when they were well, they were well. And when they were well, they would and then there's no bullshit with children. They're not hypochondriacs. When they're sick, they're sick. When they're well, they're well. And they tell you, when they're ill,
even when they're sick, they're well. They want to do stuff when they're sick. Yeah.
So I just liked I liked they're vulnerable, and I liked their honesty. They were always a pleasure to work with, and also so I had this kind of affinity. So that was I really enjoyed working with them. So I wanted to become a pediatrician.
So so you finish med school, you have to do internship?
Yeah, so I did internship at what was called Coronation Hospital, which is now Raymond Musa, and was a general hospital. It wasn't just a mother and child hospital. So I did my house job there. Then I did 6 months in as a senior house officer in pediatrics, and then I went to Barra to main ICU. And in main ICU. I loved intensivist. I loved emergency medicine. I loved the ICU. And when I was there, going learning how to work in an ICU, there was this cardiothoracic surgeon who was the head of ICU, and I kind of thought, like, what is this cardiothoracic surgeon doing? Running an ICU. He should, he apparently was one of the top cardiothoracic surgeons in the country, and he was, had golden hands. And lucky I was this guy who was not in theatre, and and so this was 1988, and he, in the ward rounds, and and after, in the evenings, you kind of sit around between ward rounds, and he told me he was HIV. He was living with HIV, and basically the moment he found out that he was, like a dentist who didn't have gloves, the moment he found out that he was HIV, HIV infected, they took him off the circuit, because obviously they were worried about him transmitting, blood leakage and that.
1988.
1988.
Yeah.
And he died a year later of TB. It was just like, so that was my first exposure of not a patient, but my boss,
Yeah.
my doctor boss,
A colleague even,
a colleague,
right?
who died before treatment was available. So now if treatment was available, he would be allowed, today he'd be operating.
Yeah. As so many are, right? Yeah.
So it was just, so that's, so then, so you see it doesn't only affect, the people that you're working, your patients, but also your colleagues. And we did see in those days, we had nurses that died, social workers that died, doctors that died, statisticians that died of HIV.
But doesn't that hit you and think,
it is horrible.
Carry on now?
No, I mean, it was devastating to see that.
And you never think maybe I should, do something else, or?
No, because you kind of, so that's, with being, that's kind of becomes your core, so basically we're in an epidemic, like with COVID, we're in the middle of an epidemic. We're young doctors. It's our job to do something.
Figure it out.
To figure it out, find ways. And so going back to that was, I was going to be a doctor, and I ended up becoming a scientist because of a epidemic.
Yeah. Okay, so Bara, then what happens after Bara?
So after Bara, I then obviously, you go through your red circuit.
So you apply and you get in easy.
Yeah. So you do your circuit.
Yeah.
And then got my exams, and then landed a job at the ICU, at the neonatal ICU at Bara, because I liked little babies, ventilating them. Yeah. Pricking them. No, it's a joke.
As a dentist, that's concerning.
Yeah. So and then that's when I started my research, because I'm looking after babies. And
who teaches you how to do research? I mean, is it part of the program?
You just learn. I mean, so in those days, in the olden days, there was a research methods course. Peter Keaton-Jones, who was a dentist. I don't know. Yeah. Do you know him?
No,
he was a dentist. Yeah. He ran this research methods course. It was a 2-week course.
Yeah. And
at the end of the 2 weeks, you present your protocol, and now you're a scientist. Anyway, so.
Sounds like a dentist.
Sounds like a dentist. So anyway, so I wrote my first protocol and got ethics approved and applied for funding, got 40,000 Rand from the Medical Research Council.
That's big, isn't it?
It's big. And then basically that started my career. Then I had money to, pay for the blood tests, and we're just coming out of apartheid. So this is, so remember, this is a stage there was still academic boycott. So, South African scientists, doctors who are involved are not going to conferences, are not mixing with everybody because of the academic boycott. So, so the academic boycott lifts, and suddenly there are these South Africans. So first of all, when we went to conferences and we presented our data, they didn't understand our English.
Okay,
they had not, so they could. I was subtyped.
Wow, yeah, that's
they
cool.
Couldn't. They, they basically.
Wait, Prof, are you Afrikaans? What's Gray?
Gray is it's the lineage is Irish, but I have a mixture. So Portuguese. So from my mother's side, Afrikaans, Portuguese, and Irish, and from my father's side, Dutch, and Dutch and unknown, because his father was illegitimate, so we don't know much about what his dad's dad came from. But essentially, the typical melting pot of a whole lot of people. But I do, so my mother was Pretronella Hendrina Wilhelmina, so she was Afrikaans. Yeah. But after the Second World War, a lot of Afrikaans families what called we verengelsd.
Okay, so anglicized.
Yeah. These Afrikaans people send their kids to English schools, and so that's I guess I'm a hybrid.
Yeah, but you do have a white South African accent, so we can understand.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound Afrikaans.
No,
it's like an we can understand you.
Yeah, but imagine like these people hadn't heard any
South African
accent, and they. We say aluminium, and they say aluminum. And laboratory, and we say, and they say, so they like,
Yeah, no, definitely.
They were, mandatory, mandatory, so they like,
Yeah.
You know, so and we say it's a pleasure, like, or a shame.
That shame for what? Yeah.
Look how cute that, that you see a baby, say, shame.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, this is a perfect, what shame about my baby? So anyway, so suddenly, there are these South Africans that start to go to World Health Organization, start meeting, and I'm part of that. And I'm in my early 30s.
Wow.
And
So
suddenly you get exposed to, in a global area, particularly around HIV. And because we had such huge problems, and, I guess also when you're young, you're pushy, you're ambitious. And so basically you make sure that you are,
heard. Yeah.
In those areas. And so then, and we must have just sounded like these upstarts from South Africa.
You think so?
I do think so, So when my research in breast milk transmission, so this is before ARVs. So when I was trying to design my study, so women without ARVs have got two choices if they breastfeed their babies. Either your baby's going to die from diarrheal diseases and malnutrition because you can't afford the formula, or you're going to infect your baby and the baby's going to die from HIV. So women have this it's like Sophie's choice. Like what do I do? In a sense, like, how do I kill my baby? And that kind of dilemma.
It's hectic.
And so I would present the information to the woman. And then I'd say, you're going to make a choice. You're going to look at your circumstance and you're going to choose the least risk for you. And then what my job was to follow up the babies and then look at the difference in transmission, but also the outcomes of not breastfeeding, diarrheal diseases. So, so yes, you were HIV free, but were you free from malnutrition and all of that? Or yes, you got HIV, but how is your health? So when I presented my data for the first time at a conference, there was this
where was it?
in Vancouver in '96. So so first of all, we're completely naive. So I don't understand the breast milk politics, the Nestle. So we isolated in South Africa, and I was of the generation. So I wasn't from Jerry Cavadia's generation who saw what Nestle had done in South Africa and malnutrition and pushing formula. So that had escaped the next generation of pediatrician. So I was less, I thought even poor women could feed responsibly if they were using, if they were supported, they could safely formula feed.
Okay.
And, and so when I first presented my data, it's this like 33-year-old, I don't even know how old I was, 33, 36. And so, and then suddenly there's this queue of people lining up to ask me questions, and like, who funded your study? Like, what do you mean? The MRC funded my study. Are you on Nestle's payroll? So there was this whole backlash.
Well, give us what's the nutshell of what your data said?
So the basically, my data showed the transmission rates were higher in the woman that breastfed as compared to formula, and the kids that were getting formula didn't die. And they weren't malnourished, so they weren't that. And this was Soweto, and I did make the point, but they kind of thought that Nestle was paying.
This explains the line of cynics.
Yeah,
the line of cynics saying who's funding you?
Yeah, and I'm white, and I'm white, white from South Africa.
So like how you get Big Pharma. This is Big Formula is funding you.
But why Nestle specifically?
Because Nestle was that the evil. Because at that stage, Nestle was one of the biggest companies that had dumped formula in the so-called third world in those days, and kids had died because there was no safe water. It cost money, so that it was diluted, so kids were malnourished, and so Nestle did a terrible thing, to sell formula.
Yeah, this is when in the 90s.
This is in the 70s, 60s.
Oh, okay.
This is in the 60s and the 70s.
Well, it's important to mention the time frame
and so
for
by
context.
by the time I did my study, we were in a different situation. So even though we were in Soweto and there was access to water, socioeconomic status of a woman in Soweto as compared to a woman in rural Malawi are completely different. And so the point that I was trying to make also was that there are situations in Africa where women can breastfeed.
Okay.
And if at that stage,
HIV positive.
yes, yeah, HIV positive. There is a time at that stage before we knew ARVs. Before this is 10 years before we knew if you give a woman ARVs from the time she's diagnosed, triple therapy, you can breastfeed your baby. So we didn't know all of that at that stage, because at that stage there were no ARVs. So avoiding breast milk would help with preventing transmission.
Okay.
And so it was that dilemma. And what my point was that even if you are in a poor setting, women should be able to make a choice. They shouldn't be told by a doctor, breastfeed your baby.
That's what doctors were saying at the time.
Or bottle feed your baby.
Yeah.
And they should say, this is the dilemma, and how can we help you?
Okay. So that was your first experience in Canada. First time you got leaving the country. They putting your words in subtitles because nobody can understand.
Yeah, because then I had to go BBC. Was it BBC? ABC was interviewing me, and then I saw how they don't understand my. It was embarrassing.
That's so funny.
I was mortified that they couldn't understand my English.
Yeah. And then your research career takes off from there.
So then we involved in a lot of mother-to-child transmission studies, and so I was becoming good at clinicians as a clinician scientist. In 1999, because of our HIV epidemic, ESCOM, Department of Science and Innovation, and Department of Health realized that they need to start making an HIV vaccine. So they put money together and they give it to the Medical Research Council.
Why do they do this? Is it because it's affecting their workforce?
Because they knew, it's basically the best way is to make an HIV vaccine.
Yeah.
And so
it's all about the money, right?
It's all about the money. So there's something called SAVI, the South African AIDS Vaccine Initiative. And money is given for scientists in South Africa to start designing a vaccine. So at that stage, I didn't know much about HIV vaccines, but the director of SAVI approached me and said, look, Glenda, you know how to do clinical trials. I want you to join the team. And I was saying, no, I'm doing mother-to-child transmission. This is my career. And he said, no, the country needs you to work with them on an HIV vaccine.
That's cool.
And so that was cool because, so I joined the team. There were virologists, immunologists, me, the clinician, people doing animal experiments, ethicists, community engagement. And we had this whole, multidisciplinary team. The virologists designed a vaccine. We got it manufactured in overseas because at that stage, or still not even at that stage, even now we can't make our own vaccines for HIV amongst, that's another story we can go down. But, and we tested this vaccine both in the US and in South Africa, but it didn't, so other events took over, and then this vaccine regimen wasn't chosen to go forward, and then we got involved in other research. So then I've spent since then working mostly in HIV vaccines and HIV prevention, and then getting involved again in clinical development, clinical design, doing, so most of my time, besides when I was doing COVID vaccines, has been in HIV vaccines.
Okay. That's fascinating.
And that must have been very interesting because you moved now away from clinical settings. You were not seeing the babies that you usually see.
So I moved away, still seeing people, but adults.
Yeah.
And, but I was always interested in an HIV vaccine because I think the best place for children. So the best place, if you ever had to have an HIV vaccine, the best place to implement it would be with the EPI program. And then you could prevent breast milk transmission and then boost them when they become adolescents and protect them when they're older. So the reason why I became involved in HIV vaccine research, because I always wanted to bring it back to infants. And in all my years doing HIV vaccines, I've always pushed, when are we going to start to do the trials in infants? Which basically we're starting to do. trials in infants. So we're starting to do discovery medicine trials in infants, because what we've discovered is that the infant's immune system is very plastic. It's naive, and immunization in children. If you immunize in children, and the earlier you immunize, you have much more durable immune responses. So that if you immunize for any, so if you compare an adult or a 5-year-old to immunizing babies, you induce much more potent immune responses, and they're more durable. So basically, I've managed to push people to start to do some studies in infants.
Okay. There's 2 questions I want to answer now. They're loaded questions, but before I forget, we're not going to go down that road. But maybe in summary, if you know why, if you have an understanding, why is it that we are not producing vaccines in South Africa?
Well, I guess...
Or the research to produce.
Okay, yeah. So I think that's an important question. So during apartheid, South Africa was quite self-sufficient in making certain vaccines, and post-apartheid there was a kind of look, and I think there were some decisions made that actually that shouldn't be our business. We all closed down the oral polio program, and so we basically got involved in global procurement and didn't really see the need for research and development in vaccines. So that was a bad policy decision. But I guess it was pragmatic, and the people at the time were probably getting advice from WHO, they're like, don't waste your time. But it became evident that that was not a good strategy, and so hence BioVac was formed. BioVac is a public-private partnership. I think government owns 39% of it, to try and start a vaccine manufacturing capability. And so BioVac mostly did, first of all, they did reverse tech transfer. So they would get the vials, and then you do labeling, and then you do fill and finish. So you basically you get the reagents, and then you bottle, and then so basically they've been moving down to so you want to have end-to-end capability, and we haven't had end-to-end capability in South Africa for human vaccines since 96, and but now BioVac has got a tech transfer for oral cholera vaccine, and this will be the first end-to-end vaccine made on the African continent in 50 years.
Yeah. So when you say end-to-end, you mean from
the
start?
from right from the beginning. Yeah. From the seed,
Very cool.
Not like made overseas and then brought here and second phase and third phase. Yeah.
So it's exciting.
That is exciting.
And so I've been lucky because I've also been able to be involved in that program as well. So we're doing a clinical trial now. We hope to have the results at the end of the year, and then register it, and it'll be the first African vaccine that will be used for global procurement, and there's a shortage of oral cholera vaccines at a global level. So this is an exciting area. So there has not. So why hasn't South Africa got a vaccine manufacturing capability? There's just not enough investment from the government. So you need to invest more than just fill and finish. So pharmaceutical companies just want to make profit, and so they will just give us the material, and we'll put it into we'll fill it like Aspen does. We'll put it into we'll vial it and label it. Yeah. But the research and development, the upfront, the discovery work is expensive, and normally at a global level, the discovery work is paid by the public purse or philanthropy, and no farmer is going to invest in kind of blue sky research, because it's at risk. It's huge risk, and that's why you need government to pick it up.
What does discovery work mean?
It means, so you start from the beginning. You say, okay, I want to find an HIV vaccine and I don't know where to start. And I'm going to start with various strategies, and most of them will fail. And up to date, most of them have failed. And so you spend billions of rands or dollars getting to a phase 1 trial, and you have to abandon it. So big pharma is not interested. So you need other people to fund this, and it's funding people at universities, funding people who the vaccine may never see even an animal experiment.
A lot of risk.
Yeah, but you have to do that, because if we don't do that, then we don't find mRNA, and we don't find cancer vaccines or COVID vaccines. So you have to invest in that beginning part. And then you also have to invest as a government in so there's research and development. So big R, small d, and then there's research and development. So you have to also invest in development of a vaccine candidate. And that also requires, public money, because besides fit and finish, all of that costs a lot of money, lots of plants, all of that kind of thing. So you do need a government that understands the value of vaccines and understands that you're creating a workforce for good manufacturing processes, a whole industry. And so you have to have someone who understands that and drives R&D in the pharmaceutical arena, that from discovery to production, and you need big money, and we have, we've never invested that much in that. Even with our animal vaccinations, we used to make animal vaccinations in Onderstepoort. Now with this foot and mouth disease, we're having to import vaccines from Botswana, because we don't, Onderstepoort has collapsed. It's not working properly, and so it's just a tragedy in that area.
So it seems like you scientists have a tough job trying to influence and convince and tell people the story. Like the policymakers is the story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's almost like you need a PR campaign to tell a story of what
do you know Dr. Neeraj Mistry? We had Neeraj.
I was going to.
You don't know Neeraj Mistry. Yeah? He was one of the guests. You'll enjoy his episode.
I'll look at that.
Because he went to the US and became big in that sort of...
You do need, okay, so first of all, most people think science is a luxury.
Yeah.
And actually science is not a luxury, because science drives GDP. So if you look at countries like Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, so they were desperately poor countries. And these guys knew, if we don't invest in STEM, we don't invest in STEM, we don't invest in innovation, we're not going to be anywhere. And so there's a lot of indicators to look at what drives GDP. And over and above democracy and everything, the thing that drives GDP is publications. So publications is a proxy for science.
Okay.
Discovery. So the biggest driver of economic growth is science. And so if most people think, it's a luxury art, a luxury function of a poor country, and actually it's not. It's the most important thing to do in a poor country. Without science, countries will remain poor, and that's why China has also understood that they've got more engineers per capita than anywhere else in the world. And so if you don't drive investment in STEM, then
even TikTok has a STEM. You know what STEM is, yeah? Science, technology, education, something. We'll Google it.
Mathematics. Yeah.
Yes. You had another loaded question, or should we? Are we moving on?
Yeah. Well, we might be jumping ahead here, but Prof, you've lived through two health scares in the world, epidemic and a pandemic. Firstly, what's the difference between the two?
Well, I think it's, I guess the spread, that's debatable. And the epidemic is largely in different pockets of the world, and it's, you have endemic, epidemic, and pandemic. So endemic is just, so malaria would be endemic. TB.
Yeah.
But some people fight and say, no, that's also an epidemic. So depending on the burden of disease and the distribution. And so HIV is probably a pandemic, and it was a pandemic before ARVs.
But it was labeled as an epidemic.
It was labeled as an epidemic. Pandemic was, I guess, and pandemic was because it was just, I guess, the infectious nature and the flurry of its spread and the extent that at a global level, you were exposed, whether you were in a village in Malawi or you were in New York.
It didn't matter where. Yeah. And my question is, I'm reading about something called Nipah virus now that's coming around. And do you think that we are going to be living through, are we in our lifetime going to see another epidemic or pandemic?
It's likely, given the combination of climate change, natural disasters, and mobility of people, and the proximity of humans to species and to animals, and the exposure. So it is likely that we will face either outbreaks of what we call re-emerging diseases like Ebola. So outbreaks of known viruses, or outbreaks of viruses that have evolved, like influenza and avian bird flu, or a species jump that because of the exposure to animals. So it's very likely, and I guess the drivers of this now is probably climate change.
Okay, so just on that, like, if you can, when these sort of things happen and you watching it in the news, or because I mean, you're exposed to this all the time. You don't just see this sort of, or get this sort of information from the news. It's from your colleagues, because you've been in the industry. You're a pivotal part of HIV and even coronavirus. What makes you worry? Should we be worried right now?
I think we should be worried because whether it's an outbreak or an epidemic, we should be worried because these things are inevitable, and we should be prepared. And so that's why surveillance is important. The reason why we were so lucky with COVID was because of the global investment in HIV vaccine research. So basically, we just pivoted. So all the infrastructure we had built at a global level in HIV, basically all those scientists just pivoted to COVID. So the clinical scientists were ready. The labs went from neutralizing antibodies for HIV to to developing assays for COVID. The molecular biologists, rapidly, who were working on HIV, rapidly sequenced the SARS-CoV-2. The platforms we were using, you basically switched to that immunogen. So the whole global infrastructure allowed us to pivot. And so if we don't, so that's why research is important, and we should be worried if we're not investing in this kind of infrastructure to respond. So you don't have to, you can't have something that's latent, and everyone's just sitting in a room waiting for, you need to be ready. You need to be in the field. You need to be doing these things in the lab, and maybe not, in HIV and TB. So you need to be practicing. So when something does happen, you just basically shift your response to that, and you're ready. The regulators are ready, the clinicians, the lab people are ready.
So the mention of COVID is probably a good segue to this next point that I wanted to make, is that I suspect that your name became somewhat of a household name during the COVID time. I mean, I think that's the first time I heard your name.
Yeah, that's when I first heard it.
How did you get involved? What was that about? And what was it like becoming quite well known and prominent?
So at that stage, I was the president of the South African Medical Research Council, and our job is to fund and conduct research in South Africa. So on the 5th of March, I think it was, the DG of Science and Technology for Majaya, he phoned me. I was I was in Durban and I was about to catch a plane to Cape Town.
2020.
2020. And he phoned me and said, Glenda, what's our research strategy for COVID? I said, look, DJ, I'm on this plane. When I land, we'll send you something. And I sat on the plane and I thought, okay, like, what is our problems? Okay, first of all, we have a shortage of diagnostics. You know, the PCR, there was a global shortage of PCR. So we have a shortage of diagnostics and point of care diagnostics. We don't know what's going to happen. We have a country full of HIV and people living with TB. We don't know what the natural history is. We don't know what the natural history is in Black people. We don't know about comorbidities. We don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to breeze through it, or are we going to be devastated? So I knew that. So we didn't know much about that. We didn't know at that stage we thought it was those droplet spread, but actually it was aerosols. We didn't even know the mode of transmission, and we didn't know if there was going to be therapeutics or a vaccine. So I knew that vaccines are expensive. So the only way we can work is to collaborate internationally with vaccines and therapeutics. So I said we have to be able to co-fund research that happens on vaccines and therapeutics, but we can't lead it because we're talking billions of dollars. But what we can immediately do is invest in natural history, start working on rapid diagnostics, and try and figure out how to do PCR and how we can be able to diagnose this, and then also the molecular epidemiology, like how. So we set up. So basically, I put that list together and I sent it to. So Lynn Morris was the director of NICD. I said, "Does this look like a fair approach?" And that was our Bible. We stuck. So what we made on the 5th of March was what we stuck to in our funding model. And so immediately we were able to set up a genomic surveillance. That's how we could diagnose Omicron. So we had this. The guys were testing, and so we paid and we supported that. We set up wastewater surveillance. So basically, we could check. We could predict an outbreak 10 days before it happened by just looking at sewage.
Wow.
And so we set up wastewater surveillance, and then we had a healthcare worker cohort and some community-based cohorts, and we also invested in diagnostics. I gave Bhavesh Khanna, who's a TB lab scientist, gave him 650,000 rand, and he cultured COVID for us before we were culturing it, and he made a rapid a diagnostic, not a diagnostic, a control to test new tests coming in to see if they were valid, and we could deploy that test. We deployed it to about 50 countries, and so basically all the stuff that we did enabled us to respond, as scientists.
So were you on this ministerial advisory?
So I was there. So I was on the ministerial advisory committee, and then we had a couple of fights with the minister, and then it got thrown off. Shabir and I.
Who was the minister at the time?
Azweli and McKees.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So I guess I was fortunate enough because I was the president of the MRC, and we could direct the funding, and everyone, and we kept to this, my
the Bible
of what we were going to do, and that really gave us an advantage at a global level. And so we had a lot of information so every Sunday I would meet with Tony Fauci and the HH secretary, and we could show him with the DATCOV database. We could show them because we were 2 weeks, always 2 or 3 weeks also ahead of them.
How come you meet with Fauci? How does that happen?
Well, because we had data is king, and we could say, okay, Omicron's happened, and this is what it looks like in children. These are what are getting admitted, so we could show them. So we work also very.
So we were teaching the Americans.
We were helping them.
And maybe did they have subtitles on your Zoom calls?
I think by that stage they could understand me. But Discovery also was. So Discovery, we used their databases, because we didn't know whether these vaccines were working. Because when Omicron came, I thought, well, we know what's going to happen. And so the data by having a public-private partnership, we were able to generate real-world effectiveness on both the Pfizer and the J&J vaccine at a time when no one knew this.
Wow.
And we could then say to policymakers across the world, the vaccines are working.
You see, South Africans, we
so
know.
we did very
so
well
cool.
in
well done to you.
COVID.
Yeah, well, but also in that time, surely there's lots of other stuff you deal with, because when you become a well-known person, a household name, there's going to be the haters and the
trolls,
anti-vaxxers and all that stuff.
Did
you have to deal with all that?
Death threats from the anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
at one stage I had a bodyguard.
Really?
Because they said, we know where you live, we know your route.
What?
And
was that serious?
Yeah. So anyway, so we basically
I knew
for
it.
a period of time I had a bodyguard I had guards at home and a bodyguard that drove me to.
And you live
work.
alone, or who?
No, with my kids.
That's not cool.
No.
So you've got, and your kids are probably.
Well, they were like,
that's cool. We've got a bodyguard.
No, they don't. Well, they like the guard at home.
Hectic, man.
Yeah.
Okay. And then tell us about the Time Top 100 Most Influential. Where did that come up?
From HIV vaccines. So we were running a trial, an efficacy study in Africa, and we were just about to start it. So I had a lot of promise. So I guess I got it because of my work in HIV vaccines, and that I was leading this big vaccine trial.
How awesome is that? Do you have do you frame what did they give you? What did they give you?
Like little like this thing.
Yeah.
What are those things called?
Like a little pin or badge.
Pin, Yeah. And
that's underwhelming.
And I thought they give us. I think we got a picture of ourselves in the Time magazine.
So all 100 of you go.
And we got to go and get the award. No, we just got that little thing.
And where do you get the award?
It was in New York at the Times. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
Mick Trevor Noah were there.
Wow.
And
I hope you took pictures and stuff.
We did, I did, yeah. That was fun. So it was a lovely experience.
Okay, and so what's next, Prof?
Well, before that, what are you doing now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You
had two things.
Good question.
Okay. So I'm the director of the Infectious Disease and Oncology Research Institute. So in South Africa, we have we have an increase in cancer and a rising increase. And we also know that people with HIV are likely to get both infectious disease-related cancers and non-infectious diseases-related cancers early. And so there is an interface between HIV and cancer around inflammation that we don't truly understand the mechanism, what happens, what triggers this pathway. What's happening at a gene level, at a inflammation level, what's happening. So we have a lot of things to discover around why people living with HIV get cancer. So there's that issue. There's also the issue of a lot of cancers in Africa are infectious disease based, and we don't really know the mechanism. And there are a lot of cancers we don't know what the mechanisms are, but they could be infectious disease related. So part of my job is to basically open up an area of new research around infections and cancer. And so that's one part of my job. But the other part of my job is HIV vaccines. And so I'm involved in first in human, first in Africa studies that are discovery medicine. So there's a lot of technology now available. So the time is now it's not the time to stop working on HIV. We can see it. We've got crystal structures. We've got new technology. We can do single cell assays. We can understand how the immune system evolves based on the pressure of an immunogen that you give someone. So we're on the frontiers of an amazing HIV vaccine science, which I'm involved in, and I'm very excited. So I see these two things. They coalesce, but I have a job to drive a new area of research interest in South Africa, and that's with Wits University.
Okay. Our listeners won't know this because they won't be watching you. But I just wanted to say that your face was lighting up as you talking about your job,
You
which
seem very excited.
which is really cool to see. Yeah.
But Prof, this is going to sound like an anti-vaxxer question, and I really don't mean it. But just from my clinical experience, if I have a headache, I take a Panadol, my headache's gone, but then I can't sleep for 2 days. But are there studies being done, as you said, the correlation between the prevalence of people living with HIV getting cancers? Or is there a study being done to maybe correlate that it might be iatrogenic because of the ARVs that they're taking? Could that be causing some form of a cancer prevalence?
Well, the ARVs itself can cause metabolic syndrome, so they can affect your gluconeogenesis. So it's probably an interplay. So it's based on inflammation, and what are the drivers of inflammation in people living with HIV? HIV itself per se would be inflammatory, but if you're suppressed, so your immune system is not seeing HIV, but yet how much HIV in your reservoirs that may play a role.
Yeah.
But then the drugs itself, the drugs themselves can affect gluconeogenesis, lipid, lipogenesis. So the drugs themselves can have an effect on this what we call a metabolic syndrome. And then you have the genes, so we have our genetic predisposition. So you put HIV, your drugs, and your genetic predisposition all in one. And then we have lifestyle, food. And so basically, ticking time bombs, but also an important, so if we can unravel some of these things, we can create interventions, for people. Should people living with HIV on ARVs be on statins from the time they're on it? We see a lot of hypertension, a lot of diabetes. Does HIV itself accelerate this? The drugs that they're on, how does this play a role? What does it do to liver function? So I think all of these things are interrelated, and so I think it's important that we try and understand the mechanisms.
No, of course. And it's so interesting what you do, because you got to study those variables, and even those variables have variables.
Yeah.
So how can you even pinpoint it to one specific thing? And then, people will come out there and hate the research and say that this is all very biased towards something. But inevitably what you're trying to do is understand what something that is not understandable to even probably likes of yourself.
And social media also a thing that's like causing lots of
well, people get on. So people get there's an association, and it may not be a direct attribution. So people, you might, you could say, oh, HIV causes hypertension, but it doesn't. So I think it's all those associations. I mean, the most important thing about vaccine safety is to have what we call pharmacovigilance. So all drugs, even vaccines, everyone, we should be able to track the safety of these medicines and see what the side effects are. So and there are rare side effects which give vaccines a bad name or drugs a bad name. Some drugs give you Stephen Johnson syndrome. Some vaccines, you might have an anaphylactic shock, or it could cause a stroke. But these are rare, they're rare. And so then you have to say, okay, do we have what's the risk benefit? Am I willing to live with? So during COVID, maybe you were willing to live with a 1 in a million. Or, you give 1 million vaccines and one person has a bad side effect. So maybe you're willing to live with that risk during COVID. But in peacetime, then maybe you're not willing to live with those risks. And, and those the kind of, and one should be flexible and, about those things, plastic about your policy, depending on whether you're in peace or in pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. So Prof, I asked this question because because of the fact that your face was lighting up as you were talking about your work, do you think you'll be doing this till the day you die? Or
Hopefully.
yeah, is that what you want to do?
Or
Well,
till the day we die.
Yeah.
I think so. That's also the beauty of science, is that there's no retirement age.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you feel you're making a difference, but at the same time you also have to make sure that you empower the next generation.
Okay, that's a good point.
To keep working. And so you also need to know your place in the team as you get older, because you can't have these people that rule from the grave.
Oh, that's a really good
you
point.
have to open up chances for new ideas, new thoughts.
What's made you think of that?
Well, I just think that it's important. We need intergenerational teams, and young people think differently. If I think of myself when I was young, I probably made more impact from 30 to 45 than, so I think that young people are seeing things in different ways. The issues of AI and machine learning, and you understand, big data better than us. And so you might have ways of solving things that we can't do.
Okay.
And so that's why I think it's important. So I'm a big fan of interdisciplinary team. I'm also a big fan of not always being the leader of the team.
Okay, and diverse team.
And diversity, people coming from different avenues. I was at a meeting the other day, yesterday, and we're working in climate and heat and health, because heat can have an effect on prematurity. So women who are exposed to high temperatures, their babies are born early, and this has obviously impact on infant mortality and that. And someone made a 3D, one of the scientists in this team made this rudimentary 3D watch, like a watch. But basically this picks up, it has to measure temperature, ambient temperature, and your own temperature. And it has to kind of record things. But it's very rudimentary. It can't transmit to you have to then
to a remote
have an
source,
SMS, I said, well, why don't we bring the biomedical engineering team together with AI and the teams, and let's pose this, here's this watch, but this watch needs to transmit, this watch needs to do this watch needs to be better, help us create this device that we can then follow people, and not have to get SMSs, but basically, we're basically just transmitting it into the cloud. So that's why we need young people, because we can, we got paper and we're SMSing results. And no, you don't do it like that anymore.
Yeah, young and diverse. Diversity of thought. We were at a meeting yesterday where the guy was presenting to us about mouth guards in dentistry, and mouth guards with elite athletes, right? I didn't know this. They've got these special mouth guards that have a chip in them, and it picks up when they get high impacts, and it feeds to a doctor in the sidelines.
Yeah, and then they call them off for concussion. I've seen
cool.
that.
That's really cool. So
I saw that during the Springboks, that they get
yes,
off.
It's a big controversy in one of the matches there. Yeah.
And while we're talking about that, this thing was lying here.
What's that for the listeners?
This is a 3D printed model of Mount Everest. Sure. But I belong to this forum. You can have a look at it. It's pretty cool. I belong to this forum where they were discussing newer routes. There's only 2 routes on Everest, north and south. But in this forum, someone printed an STL or sent an STL file for us to have a look at it. But you can only see it in 2 dimensions. So he sent this file, and I 3D printed it, and I was having a look at it yesterday. Yeah. And that's like the type of innovation.
And you can figure out, okay, we could walk this way.
So, Prof, the future is long and bright. I mean, just take good care of your health and keep alive as long as you can.
Yeah.
What do you do what else makes you light up besides the work you do?
Wine.
Okay, wine, yeah.
No.
Red wine.
Is that why you're in the Cape now? Are you? You live in the Cape now, right?
No, don't give away our location.
Cape and Joburg, both.
Okay, all right. Best of both.
Okay, so exercise. So walking. I love walking. When I'm in Cape Town, if the waves are good, I'll bodyboard.
Oh.
So I like bodyboarding, and I like cold water swimming. So I like going into 10 degrees.
Okay. So the Cape is fine.
Submerge. You can hear if you want.
Plunging.
You want endorphins. If you want, it's good for. First of all, it's good for metabolic and anti-inflammatory, aging. So I like cold water swimming.
Are you into that longevity type of stuff, Peter Attia and all these
I
things?
kind of think there's some interesting. So not in those kind of. I like the philosophy of what should you do to retain your health for as long as possible. And there's it's exercise, it's diet, it's
Fasting?
impact.
Do you fast?
I try and do intermittent fasting, and and so it's impact and it's community.
Yes,
So
community.
and
The five things of a blue zone country. Yeah.
And then basically it's then enjoy in your life. And what is joy? Red wine, music.
Who's your community? Who do you see as your community?
It's a group of there are a lot of different kinds of community. But so in Cape Town, it's a bunch of girls that we hang out, go to nice restaurants and bodyboard and hike. In Johannesburg, it's another group, where we go and go listen to jazz or movies, dinner, walking, and then in Soweto, it's a different group. So it's there's a lot of I have a lot of diversity and variety, in my community. But but the important thing is to feel like I'm in a community. I don't exist by myself.
Yeah.
And these are the people that I will take a bullet for, and they'll take a bullet for me. And so and that's what's not so the joy and the feeling of connectedness is important.
Well, Prof, no, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I really learned a lot and I enjoyed it. I had goosebumps many times in this conversation, just hearing your story and inspiring stuff you do. So thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know if you got anything.
Yeah, no, Prof, I just want to say thank you for even accepting our invitation, even after hearing the story that, you had to have a bodyguard. And you took a chance on us and drove all the way to...
I mean, my colleague from...
I need a bodyguard for this place.
It's Bedford View. You should. I mean, my colleague from the UK, he said to me, how did two naughty young boys from KZN get the Minister of Health and stuff on? So similarly, we say to you, thank you for just trusting us and coming on the show. I mean, hope you had fun. Anything you want to say?
Is there anything that you'd like to say?
I had fun, and I look forward to seeing how you're going to navigate Everest again.
Yeah, me too.
Don't tell him that. His mom won't be happy to hear that. Thanks, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Cool.